Hello, Father Rich coming to you back in the office, my office, here in the bookshelf corner. We've been over in this corner before, but we have a little different angle. You can see the doorway leading out into the living room, and then I believe you can see the courtyard there. Reminds us that this was initially like one of the living rooms or maybe the dining room of the rectory. And then I think it was Father Brooks who they needed more space for the staff offices in the main office area, so moved the pastor's office here, and we've continued it that way. But the focal point I wanted to bring up were a couple items over here in the corner, and have to do with the pro-life march, and that I've been blessed to go to in Washington, D.C. I've been ordained 19 years. I believe I've been there 16 of the years for that march. And when I was in Warren at St. Joe's, unlike Our Lady of Peace, who had this when I got here, we'll talk about that in a moment, we didn't have anything to carry in the march. And one of the practical reasons it helps to have something is that all your people in your group can have a focal point to stay near, so you can stay together. When you have hundreds of thousands of people, and those marches are just incredible to be a part of, so peaceful, so positive, prayerful, and really remarkable. But I was telling the community at St. Joe's in Warren that I wanted them to have a competition. I kind of was joking at a mass to have a competition of them to give us stuff that we could carry. So one of the parishioners got a couple of vine branches and put those together and made them into a Cairo. You can't really, you can barely see it. Pictures are coming down. But it's a Cairo. It's the symbol of the Cairo, the Greek letters for Christ. So anyway, so I got here, we already had this sign, Defend Life, Our Lady of Peace, Mary holding the infant Jesus, and then the Lamb of God. And so that was part of the tradition when I got here, and we've continued to go to the march here at Our Lady of Peace the years that I've been here. But this whole essay is really, I learned something new. Remember, this is our series on how the church has changed the world. And this essay is called Beloved Physician and Teller of Truth. And it's about a man that I had never heard of. Lived in the 1800s here in the United States, up in New England. And he actually was born and was a Quaker when he was growing up. But he had a great hunger for understanding nature and being outside. And in the letters that he would write back home when he was at school, he would talk about his adventures and going out to explore nature. And at one point, he actually, as a teen, went to accompany a naturalist going to do observations up in Nova Scotia. And part of that was the embryology. This was just as embryology was starting to study the beginnings of life and understanding the reproductive systems of man and woman. And he really got interested in that. And so that is what he ended up, eventually went off to medical school. His parents really pushed him on that. And he went to Harvard Medical School, and he also graduated from Harvard undergrad, became a respected physician. But in the midst of that, he kind of felt, and they mentioned in the article, the teller of truth, that he couldn't just be a doctor who just kind of, focuses on healing, but he wanted to look and focus on the truth and the science and the facts behind that. And he couldn't be quiet about basic realities as he grew to understand things more. And he became convinced rather early in his studies that life began at conception. And he would talk about the independence of the nerve center of a fertilized egg making its way to the uterus and the womb of the mother. And how if it was that independent nerve center, self-existing, self-acting, then why would it lose that identity once it attached itself to the uterine wall? And so he would say that is a living being. And his analogy was, if there's someone living inside the hut, then if you burn the hut, and you're responsible for the death of that individual inside. And so this became a major passion of his and a major cause, to the point he influenced other doctors, the government, in the midst of the medical groups and communities he was part of, and they actually led to most states outlawing abortion in the post-Civil War era of our country. And those laws would stay in place until, the late 1900s. And of course, Roe v. Wade, which legalized it on a national level, abortion. So he not only felt that way when it came to life, but he also he got involved in the conversation about slavery. And he wrote an article in the Boston Journal as a young doctor about the fact that some people were trying to point out these kind of mutant sheep that were found in England, that this was to them an argument for why there can be racialism, as it's called, that this idea of certain races being superior to others. And he refuted that, and he rejected that wholeheartedly from a medical, scientific perspective. So this idea of respecting life, which is an issue we need to know about today, that we're called to stand up for all life at all levels. In the most vulnerable in the womb of their mothers, we say are a priority for us because they are defenseless, but certainly our call to respect life also goes with the poor, all vulnerable, racial equality, gender equality, immigrants, those criminals, that we respect life from womb to tomb, as we say. And so I never mentioned the man's name, but his name was Horatio Storer, and he again would become a doctor. He eventually would convert to Catholicism in his 50s, and he would live to be 92. I think he died in 1922. And not only did he become a leading gynecologist, and that was a real focal point for him, he created hospitals to take women in that were troubled and dealing with troubled births. So he really lived out his Christian faith, and then even in his upper years, found himself trying to help defend the French who were starting to immigrate into New England, and speaking up for them and protecting them and recognizing their rights as well. So here you had a Harvard grad who was English, and he had seen the discrimination against the Irish Catholics, but now was seeing it against the French as well. So he really continued to live this out throughout his whole life. And he's a great example to us of the way the church has changed the world. And we've been at the forefront of standing up against abortion but the call to stand up for all injustice on all levels of life, in all stages, but certainly a certain priority we have for that life in the womb of the mother. And we thank the church, and we thank Horatio Storer for this legacy that we've been handed on in our Catholic faith, and to continue to stand for life and to defend life at all stages. So thanks for joining me. Have a great day, and God bless.